Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for this introduction. I feel really honored to be here. When I was thinking about the title, and I came up with this word, because half of my life lived in China, and the other half in the US. I thought there is a term for that, Chinamerica. It feels kind of surreal to stand here and deliver this presidential address. The Society for the Scientific Study of Religion was the very first academic association I ever joined. That was in 1992, right after I received my master's degree in sociology from the Catholic University of America under the mentorship of Dean Hoagie. Many of you may remember that Dean Hoagie passed away in September 2008, less than 2 months before the annual meeting where he's supposed to give his presidential address. He would have been very pleased to know that I, a student of his, have followed his steps and reached this podium in this role. This address is dedicated to him. I feel like he is with us here in spirit. The surreal feeling actually began more than a year ago when I first received the notification about my nomination. My immediate reaction was, is today the April 1st? I expressed my disbelief to the past president and the chair of the nomination committee, Rhys Williams. Who am I to receive such an honor from this society, the best of its kind in the world? I'm merely someone who was born and grew up in a faraway land as a country boy, and have studied religions in communities and societies that may be perceived marginal rather than mainstream. So this is like a rags to riches tale, which actually still happens in America today. It feels surreal also because I'm delivering this presidential address in English. Growing up in a village in northern China, I hated to learn English in high school. I was not sure about why I hated it, because I still remember the first sentence that I learned in the first class. Long live Chairman Mao. The communist leader Chairman Mao was worshipped like a god. Not long after I learned to memorize that sentence, though, he died. But his body has been preserved like that of a saint in a mausoleum in the Tiananmen Square. The mentioning of Tiananmen Square also brings back more surreal memories. I first came to the US as a visiting scholar in January 1989. Back then, my English vocabulary looked a lot like my pocket, pretty much empty. During the Tiananmen Square democracy movement from April to June, every morning I read every word about China in the Washington Post and the New York Times, flipping a dictionary. Then I was glued to the television day and night. Within about 2 months, I lost more than 10 pounds of body weight, but my English became qualitatively better. So this way of intense language learning, coupled with extreme weight loss, was very effective, though not recommended. It is an exceptional experience, probably not replicable. Then 1 week into the fall semester, by luck or by providence, I received a scholarship to begin my graduate studies with Dean Hoagie. That scholarship had originally been awarded to another Chinese student. When that student failed to show up by the deadline of the late registration, it passed on to me. I have always wondered whether that Chinese student disappeared under the tanks rolling through the Tiananmen Square. Perhaps his or her spirit is with us as well. Personal experiences are always idiosyncratic and exceptional. However, social scientists should not fall in the trap of exceptionalist thinking. This is a point I want to make in this presidential address. I believe my studies of religion in China and Chinese diasporas may help to shed some light on the definition of religion, the measurement of religiosity, and the conceptualization of religious change in the modern world. So let us begin with the trends of religious change. What are the major trends of religious change in the world today? Earlier this year, the Pew Research Center released the excellent report, The Future of World Religions, Population Growth Projections 2010 to 2050. To avoid the date of April 1st, it was embargoed until April 2nd. This is probably the first comprehensive examination and projection of all religions in the entire world that has considered factors of fertility, life expectancy, migration, and conversion. It highlights two major findings through the subtitle: why Muslims are rising fastest and the unaffiliated are shrinking as a share of the world population. Both trends seem to be reasonable and easily understandable. The significantly higher fertility rate of Muslims everywhere is the major factor for the continuous increase of both the number and the proportion of Muslims in the world population. Switching is the major factor for the increase of the number of unaffiliated, but the significantly lower fertility rate of the unaffiliated keeps their proportion shrinking in the overall population. If we just talk about switching in and out without considering fertility rates, the unaffiliated will net an increase of 61 million between 2010 and 2050, while Christians will experience a net decrease, 66 million. That's the table borrowed from the Pew report. However, the higher fertility rate of Christians will keep their total number increase and the proportion steady in the world population. Neat, isn't it? But there is a serious problem. These projections are made with one assumption: there will be no religious switching in China in the coming decades. In other words, if we hold China constant, these two trends would stand out. To be fair, the report does include a paragraph to note this assumption, but that paragraph is placed so deep in the report that most readers would fix their gaze on the growth of Muslims and the shrinking percentage of unaffiliated. The media certainly have picked up these two highlights. The assumption that religion will not change in China is simply indefensible in light of what we now know. Some of you attended some of the sessions on Chinese religion at this meeting. It is anything but a constant. Given the news coverage nowadays and the scholarly studies of contemporary China, I don't think I need to elaborate on the various and the rapid social and religious changes happening in China. So far, one thing that does remain unchanged: the Chinese Communist Party who wields power. The CCP has insisted that atheism be the official ideology for the party and for the larger society. This is the same ideology that the party state used to eradicate religion in China between 1966 and 1979. For 13 years, the party state closed down all religious sites and banned all religious activities. Nevertheless, religion survived and persisted throughout that period. Since 1979, various religions have revived and thrived. By now, it has become clear, as the Pew Report acknowledges, that China has the largest number of Buddhists in the world, has the largest number of folk religious believers in the world, and is one of the top 10 countries with the largest numbers of Christians. The Pew Report justified their assumption of holding China constant by the fact that there is a lack of reliable census or survey data that can be used for modeling fertility and conversion. It is certainly very difficult to collect data of religion in China because of political and cultural obstacles. Nonetheless, there have been plausible estimates that clearly show high rates of conversion to Christianity. The CCP took power in mainland China in 1949. Around 1950, here it is. Around 1950, there were about 3 million Catholics and 1 million Protestants. By 1980, Catholics remained at about 3 million, and Protestants had increased to 3 million. In 2010, there were 9 million Catholics and 58 million Protestants, according to the Pew Report, the Pew Report of Global Christianity that was published in 2011. Most scholars and researchers inside and outside China believe the Pew's estimates are on the conservative end. The actual numbers might be even higher, although scholars from China who follow the party state line will insist on some lower numbers. If the numbers of Christians increased from 6 million to 67 million in the last 30 years, what are the reasons to believe that they will not increase that much in the next 30 or 40 years? About 10 years ago, I examined some of the social, economic, and cultural factors in favor of Christian conversion in an article entitled "Lost in the Market, Saved at McDonald's: Conversion in Urban China." As far as I can see, the favorable factors continue to be in place in the foreseeable future. If the increase in the next 40 years is similar to that in the past 30 years, there should be at least 61 million more Christians and 61 million less unaffiliated in the world population. Therefore, these two bars basically cancel out. Moreover, as the sociology of religious conversion has established, religion spreads through individual believers. As more and more people are exposed to Christianity through interpersonal interactions with Christians, the growth could accelerate, as it has been in the last 30 years. To project the growth potential in the next few decades, it is probably more appropriate to use a metric such as the compound annual growth rate. That's a method modeling growth that dampens the effect of periodic spikes and dips and calculates an average rate of growth over a long time period. So from 1980 to 2010, the compound annual growth rate of Protestants alone was more than 10%. and 7% if we take that from 1950 to 2010. For the sake of argument, let's assume that in the coming years, there will be severe persecutions like those experienced during the Cultural Revolution. This assumption would lead us to take the lower growth rate for projection, with this rate of 7% averaged annual growth. By 2030, there will be more than 224 million Protestant Christians in China. That is going to be more than all Protestants, Catholics, and Orthodox Christians combined in the US. That number was 247 million in 2010 and 225 million in 2014, and may continue to decline in coming years, again, according to the Pew report. Demographers have projected that the Chinese population will reach its peak in 2030 at 1.4 billion. By then, Protestant Christians will constitute 16% of the Chinese population. It could be 33% by 2040 and 67% by 2050. If we add the number of Catholics into the equation, it would take fewer years for China to become the largest Christian nation, and the Christian percentage in the population would increase even faster. Of course, the growth may not continue indefinitely, but it is difficult to determine a priori where that stopping point lies. Perhaps we can get some idea by referring to similar societies. Mainland China has already surpassed Taiwan in terms of percentage of Christians in the population. In Taiwan, the number is 4.5%. Will the stopping point be more like the percentage of Christians in Hong Kong? That's between 12 to 20%. Or more like that among Chinese in Singapore, which was 20% in 2010 and increasing. Or more like that among Chinese Americans, which is about 30%. One important difference between mainland China and the Chinese communities or societies is that the Communist Revolution has swept away or severely damaged traditional culture and religions, so that there is less resistance to Christian evangelism in mainland China. If we compare China with some non-Chinese societies, will China's Christian growth overtake South Korea, which is 29% Christian, and come ever closer to the US, which was 71% in 2014 and is in the trend of decline? With China growing and the US declining, how likely and how soon may we see the US and China converging in terms of the percentage of Christians in the population? Apparently, the religious change in China throws off the two highlighted projections. Of the Pew report. Hundreds of millions of the unaffiliated Chinese will likely convert to Christianity, so that the two bars will reverse. I hope you get the idea. In addition, given the increase of the number of Christians in China, the overall proportion of Muslims in the world population will be significantly smaller than the Pew projects. How do we know how many Christians there are in China? The Chinese census does not ask about religion. Many Christian churches in China do not keep records of membership, which is a strategic response to political suppression. Without census data or membership data, we have to try survey data. The Horizon Research Group carried out the Chinese Spiritual Life Survey in 2007 with a representative sample of more than 7,000 cases. As far as I can tell, this survey remains the best survey of religion in China. Among the respondents in that survey, 3.2% said they believed Christianity. This includes Catholics and Protestants. However, taking identity as the only measure is problematic in the Chinese context. Besides the reluctance to reveal religious identity to strangers, the survey people, for political reasons, there is also the cultural tendency of not formally joining any particular religion, which is a consequential habit of the heart formed by centuries of religious repression. To see a more complete picture of Christianity in China, we must examine multiple dimensions of religiosity. So here is my analysis based on the 2007 survey. It shows the estimates of self-identified Christians. The second group is believers in Jesus Christ without identifying with Christianity. And the third group is the ritual participants without believing or belonging. How many Christians in China? We may say with confidence that Christians comprise 3.2 to 7.1% of the Chinese population in 2007. The midpoint is a little over 5%. The self-identified Christians may be in the core of Christianity. The practitioners without believing or belonging may be experimental seekers on the periphery. The believing without belonging group is in between the core and the periphery. If we follow the doctrine of salvation by faith alone, the believers of Jesus Christ could also be put in the core. While self-identification with Christianity in China tends to be lower than the actual numbers of practicing Christians, many of the self-identified Christians in the US or Europe may be nominal Christians without believing or practicing. Talking about religious identity, there's an even more serious problem. Are religious identities necessarily exclusive to each other? The Pew Report, as well as most studies of religion in the West, assumes people have a singular religious identity. In the questionnaire, you can only choose one of the categories. In reality, however, some individuals maintain two or more religions, such as the Jewish Buddhists. They are called Jubu. Or Messianic Judaism has tens of thousands of congregants. Among the Chinese, some claim to be Confucian Christians, although it is debatable whether Confucianism is a religion or not. The belief that religion is a singular, exclusive identity is probably one of the leftover beliefs of the early modern times. It is similar to the race question. Since 2000, Americans have the freedom to choose more than one race in the census form and on some other occasions. Is it time for religion researchers to update their way of asking the religion question as well? I think so. To complicate matters further, even if someone identifies with a single religion, this person may nonetheless hold beliefs and practices of other religions. Among the respondents of the General Social Survey, 1/3 of the self-identified atheists said they prayed at least once a week. More than 30% of Christians say they definitely or probably believe in reincarnation. Some Christians and Jews practice Buddhist meditation or Hindu yoga. In China, although most people do not identify with any particular religion, about 85% of people nonetheless hold religious or spiritual beliefs or engage in some religious or spiritual practices. In the increasingly globalizing era, all kinds of religions have become available to people. Consequently, the non-alignment of different dimensions of religiosity may have become increasingly common. In the US, Nancy Ammerman has shown that the everyday spirituality is important to many Americans. So we really should sharpen the measurement tools of religiosity in order to capture the complex reality of religion in the globalizing era. But are the spiritual practices or beliefs religious? What is religion after all? Regarding the definition of religion, social scientists have had two common practices: expediency and evasion. The first is to define religion for the convenience of one's own research on a topic in hand, including studying sports as religion, economics as religion, or communism as religion. The second is following Max Weber's witty strategy of evasion, avoiding or postponing the definition question indefinitely. I believe it is our social responsibility as social scientists to come up a definition of religion. I have more about in my book, so I wouldn't say too much here. So without defining religion, how do we justify our gathering here annually? A definition is a conceptual tool for handling empirical phenomena. Tools in themselves cannot be said to be right or wrong, true or false. But some tools are more useful than others. A useful tool may nonetheless need improvement. In this regard, I would say that Durkheim's definition of religion is a useful conceptual tool, but it is a kind of Stone Age tool that requires substantial upgrading for the purposes of research on religion in the modern, pluralizing, and globalizing world today. For the purposes of social scientific study of religion in China, I developed a definition of religion in my book on religion in China. The definition is, religion is a unified system of beliefs and practices about life and the world, relative to the supernatural, that unite the believers or followers into a social organization or moral community. This definition includes 4 essential elements of religion. As you can see, the supernatural, beliefs, practices, and organization. What is the most essential core of religion? The irreducible or irreplaceable thing in religion. Thanks to the Chinese communists, whose social engineering efforts in the second half of the 20th century produced a kind of natural and extraordinary experiment. We can take a rare glimpse into the essential core of religion when all its peripheral adornments are stripped away. During the eradication period between 1966 and 1979, the Chinese communists closed down all religious buildings, destroyed many religious artifacts, or shoved them into museums, dismissed all religious organizations, imprisoned staunch religious leaders, forced believers to renounce religious beliefs, and punished those who engaged in any religious practice. Furthermore, the Chinese communists forced everyone to cleanse their minds and hearts of all old ideas, old cultures, old customs, or old habits called 破四旧, which include all religious and spiritual beliefs and practices. They demanded everyone to break out a revolution deep in one's soul, 灵魂深处爆发革命, and eliminate even a flickering thought of the self or ego. 狠斗私自一闪念. After all this were done for more than a decade, however, religion survived. How was that possible? Since the lifting of the ban in 1979, we have learned through interviews and various testimonial writings that during the periods of harshest suppression, some believers simply kept their belief in secret without revealing to anyone, not even to their most intimate people, such as their spouses or children, who might turn them in if they know about that. Christians retained their belief in God and Christ, and Buddhists held on to their belief in the Dharma. I would further argue that occasionally some people may not even be conscious of their belief in the supernatural. Such sentiments for the supernatural might suddenly rise during certain existential moments, such as facing a grave danger, inexpressible joy, astonishing wonder, overwhelming awe, or marvelous gratitude. There's a novel in China after the Cultural Revolution. It says, 感谢生活. I'm grateful, but I don't know what to grateful to whom. Such sentiments may remain submerged deep in one's mind for a long time before they surface. My father, for example, was a lifelong staunch Communist Party member who, like Constantine the Great, was baptized in his deathbed. After his retirement, he practiced various Qigong, including Falun Gong, before the party banned it. One day he shared with me his near-death experience. It was in a cold winter many years ago. He was riding a bicycle to cross a river on the ice. Suddenly the ice cracked in front of him and he tumbled into the river and slipped under the thick ice. Then, he said, he saw someone with a white garment guiding him to the hole in the ice so that he could climb out and get home. Was that Guanyin Bodhisattva or Jesus? He did not even think about that until many years after his retirement. Eventually, he decided that was Jesus who saved him. Then that's the baptism in the end. The human brain may be hardwired for religious thinking and feeling, as some neurologists in recent years have argued. For some people, this part of the brain stays dormant until it is rekindled or awakened. I have some examples to say, but I don't have time. My definition of religion, therefore, is both substantial and functional, so substantive and functional. I applied it to study religion in communist-ruled China, in which atheism is the oppressor of religion in the subsystem of society, whereas quasi and semi-religious beliefs and practices have played very important roles in defeating the atheist endeavor. In the US, sociologists of religion have commonly focused on the fully developed religions, measuring religiosity. Okay, that's moved too fast. Go back. Okay, I think I accidentally hit something here. Okay. Okay, so in the US, we commonly measure religiosity by identity and attendance. But I think we should pay much more attention to semi, quasi, and pseudo-religious phenomena. Robert Balla was one of those who paid more attention to those types of religion. Some of the types may be exchangeable in different contexts. During the Cultural Revolution, when religion was eradicated from society, pseudo-religious expressions were ubiquitous in the whole Chinese society. The Chinese Communist leader Chairman Mao was very venerated as the reddest sun in people's hearts. In the daily routine, many people made prayer-like and confession-like reporting in front of Mao's portrait or statue in the morning and evening. Mao's sayings were compiled into the Little Red Book. Many people carried around the Little Red Book with them all the time. Tens of thousands of young people would uphold the Little Red Book to form the Red Sea in Tiananmen Square. The Chinese Communist organization is like a religion, with an organizational hierarchy and an emphasis on communist beliefs and rituals. All of these are similar to religion, but lacks the essential component, the supernatural. Therefore, it is most appropriate to call it a pseudo-religion rather than any other type of religion. However, since his death, Chairman Mao has become a god in Chinese folk religion. Mao's statues can be found not only on many university campuses, much like other historical figures, but can also be found in temples in rural areas or in mountains, just like idols of gods. Mao was a heavy smoker. In some of the folk religious temples, in front of the idol of Mao, the worshippers do not burn incense stick. Instead, they light a cigarette and put it in his hand. I applaud the researchers of the Pew Report for including the category of folk religion and place it on par with other religions. Some anthropologists have provided us elaborative descriptions of some exotic traditional religions of tribal societies that are far removed from modernity. But it is rare, still rare, to find studies where folk religion is given the same status as other religions. According to the Pew Report, I quote, "Folk religions are closely tied to a particular people, ethnicity, or tribe. In some cases, elements of other world religions are blended with local beliefs and customs. These faiths often have no formal creeds or secret texts. Examples they provided, again quote, African traditional religions, Chinese folk religions, Native American religions, and Australian Aboriginal religions, unquote. This characterization of folk religion is basically fine. However, I have some serious questions about what is excluded from this category in their counting. First, why does folk religion only pertain to Africans, Asians, Native Americans, and Aboriginal Australians? Does this mean that Europeans and the Euro-Americans do not have any folk religion? Here I'm not trying to be politically correct, but trying to point out what seems unperceivable by these researchers for whatever reasons. Would it be more appropriate to include Wicca or paganism in this category of folk religion? I think so. Second, should we include Shaivism in this category? Since the coining of this term by Robert Balla and his colleagues in 1985, we have seen an increase of Americans becoming unaffiliated but following some sort of Shaivism. If Shailaism is defined as individualized mixing of beliefs and practices taken from multiple institutional religions as well as folk traditions, you will find it common phenomena in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, and probably also in Korea, Japan, and India. In those societies, this kind of individualized mixing would be legitimately called folk religion. If we include paganism and Shailaism in this category of folk religion, we should have a significantly larger proportion of followers in this category in the overall religious landscape of the world today. Moreover, this matters to the projection of future change of religion. In our studies of folk religion in Chinese societies, we have distinguished three types of folk religion: sectarian, communal, and individual. We find that different types of folk religion have different trajectories in the modernization process. Whereas the communal type, such as the worship of localized deities, has declined, the sectarian type, such as Yiguan Dao, has risen to compete with other institutionalized religions. And the individual type, such as Feng Shui and divination, has increased along with better education and the free flow of spiritual information. So the increase of Shailaism is probably common to modern or postmodern societies. More importantly, folk religion is not necessarily exclusive to other religions. On one hand, the communal folk religion commonly regards it as ascribed, so that everyone in the community would be considered part of the communal religion, even if they have become Christian or Buddhist. In this regard, think about Shinto and Hinduism. That might be considered folk religion to some degree. On the other hand, many believers in the institutionalized religions hold beliefs and practices that are typical of folk religion. When we cross-tabulate this using the social change survey in Taiwan, we find that 80 to 90% of Buddhists and Taoists believe or practice folk religion. And 40 to 60% of Christians and Muslims also believe or practice folk religion. This shows that we must pay more attention to the various types of religion and develop better measurements of religiosity. The last point, religion is changing. That is not news. What is challenging is to conceptualize the nature of religious change. Is it secularization, rationalization, or pluralization? Do we see convergence or divergence across societies? Are there common trends and law-like patterns, or is each society changing in its own unique ways? The secularization paradigm conceptualizes the universal trends of religious decline or declining significance of religion in society. As the classic secularization theories have become untenable, there have been two approaches when searching for alternative theories. One approach is to develop new universals to replace the old ones. The other approach abandons the universal and resorts to exceptionalism. The first approach is obvious in the works of Rodney Stark and his associates. They argue that the economics of religion is applicable not only to the US, but also to Europe and to the rest of the world. Rodney Stark and Roger Finke wrote to the Chinese readers of the Chinese edition of Acts of Faith. I quote, "If it would be foolish to try to formulate a physics that only applies to the US, or a biology that held only in Korea. It is equally foolish to settle for a sociology of religion that applies only to Western nations. I agree with them on this point, in principle. We should strive to discover law-like patterns across societies. However, when I actually tried to apply economics of religion to analyze religious change in China, I find that their supply-side theories cannot explain well the kind of religious change in China. The supply-side theories may have significant explanatory power for situations of the buyer's market, that is, societies with oversupply of religion, such as the US. But there is another type of market, the seller's market, where there is a chronic shortage of supply. The Hungary-born economist János Korné argues that the socialist economy under communism is a shortage economy by nature. I have extended Korné's theory to the religious sphere and argued that the religious economy of China is a shortage economy under oligopoly, in which only a few religions are considered legal and they are under restrictive regulations. The shortage economy under oligopoly results in the three parallel markets of religion, the red, the black, and the gray, and each market has its own dynamics of change. In short, I find the patterns and the dynamics of religious change in China are quite different from that in the US. Nevertheless, I think my theories are within the new paradigm that perceives religious vitality instead of overall decline. However, as you know, Steve Warner, who heralded the new paradigm, has maintained that the new paradigm applies specifically to the US, whereas the secularization paradigm applies to Europe. Steve is one of my mentors, but in America, you are allowed to disagree with your mentors. He has suggested that there must be a different paradigm for China. He even suggested my triple market theory as the Chinese paradigm, which is an honor that I'm not willing to accept. The patterns I have identified in China may not be uniquely Chinese. It might be applicable to other societies under religious oligopoly, which happens to be about a half of the countries in the world today. Along with the crumbling of the secularization paradigm, some scholars, I wouldn't name the names, seem to be torn between perceiving the US or Europe as the exceptional case in religious change. Some Chinese scholars also insist that Chinese religion is so unique that none of the Western theories apply. But resorting to some version of exceptionalism may have gone too far. Here's what I said, and I would say again. Certainly, social scientists of religion should recognize and appreciate religious variations among individuals, groups, communities, and societies. But science as a modern enterprise is to discover law-like patterns across the variations. This is an important characteristic of social science. It sets itself apart from certain disciplines of the humanities that seek to establish the idiosyncratic uniqueness of the particular events, cases, or people. We certainly need to be cautious in claiming a discovery of any universal pattern. But that caution is different from abandoning the pursuit of it. Now let us think for a moment about the grand-scale global trends. If the increase of Christians and the decrease of the unaffiliated continue in China, if the decrease of Christians and increase of the unaffiliated continue in the US, can we say that China and America are inching closer to each other in terms of the configuration of religions? Will these changes reach a point of similarity that we could reasonably talk about our religious Chinamerica? In the meantime, if the Muslim population continues to increase in Europe due to fertility, migration, and conversion, will there be a day when Europe and the Arab world become so close that we might reasonably talk about our religious Eurabia? More importantly, given these trends of religious change, what roles will religion play in the coming decades? For this annual meeting, the program chair, Carsten Wheeler, and I organized two special panels for two of the hot spot movements in the world today. One is on the ISIS, the other is on the umbrella movement in Hong Kong. While ISIS has become a destructive movement threatening to the world, the umbrella movement in Hong Kong represents hope for religious contribution to democracy and freedom. We need to do more research that treat religion as an independent variable. In conclusion, facing the multiple challenges in this globalizing and pluralizing era, I call for social scientists to abandon exceptionalistic thinking in our social science endeavor. We should strive to measure religiosity as objectively as possible, document the trends of change as accurate as possible, and interpret the change as scientifically as possible. My friends and colleagues, we have a lot to do in the coming decades. The field of the social scientific study of religion is getting ever more exciting. Thank you.